At a meeting of his Security Council, Putin blasted the U.S. for ignoring Russia's security concerns over NATO and Eastern Europe, and especially in Ukraine. In a televised address to the nation, Putin explained the decision to recognize the independence of two breakaway states in eastern Ukraine. He addressed the Ukrainian people directly in a thinly veiled threat.
You want
to be decommunized? Well, we're quite fine with that. But don't stop halfway, as they say. We are ready to show you what decommunizing Ukraine really means.
Recognition could mean Putin may send regular Russian forces into eastern Ukraine. The Kremlin could try to justify the move by saying they were protecting the ethnic Russian population. Shelling in the east between Ukrainian forces and Russian-backed separatists has increased dramatically in recent days. Unsubstantiated threats about a looming Ukraine invasion, which Ukraine denies, forced an evacuation of thousands of Russians by bus and train into Russia. More than 150,000 Russian forces have spent weeks along Ukraine's eastern border and in Belarus, some complaining on social media about the conditions, sleeping on floors and having to buy food with their own money. Whether those forces would be part of a limited incursion or an all-out assault geared to trap and destroy Ukraine's military in the east is unclear. Hardliners like Russian Security Council head Nikolai Patrushev want no deal with the U.S., who they see as enemy number one.
They are hiding their true goal, to destroy the Russian Federation.
It is clear in any invasion, civilians, Russian and Ukrainian, would be caught on the battlefield. The Belarus leader said he's prepared to host super nuclear weapons if threatened by the West. In Kiev, Ukraine, Steve Harrigan, Fox News.
Steve, thanks so much for that update there. To discuss more of this even further, I'm going to bring in former diplomat Bruen. And Brett, we have been talking about this at length all last week and the week before, but things definitely escalated today with this meeting Putin had and his televised address. Just your first thoughts. What did you make of it?
It was an astounding speech. I mean, it truly just cast all pretense and all of the normal diplomatic language that you would expect even from Vladimir Putin when it comes to his designs, not only on Ukraine, but on large swaths of Europe. I mean, essentially what Putin said earlier today was, whatever flimsy story or connection that I conjure up, I can claim that territory for my country. I mean, this undermines one of the most fundamental principles going back to the Peace of Westphalia of 1638, where countries basically agreed we're not going to invade each other. We're going to generally try to respect each other's sovereignty. Putin just tossed it out the window and said, you know what? When I want something, I'm going to take it.
Brett, I've been hearing a lot that many observers of this say the Minsk agreement is now dead. For our viewers who don't know what that is, when it was agreed to, where it was agreed to, can you enlighten us?
Yeah, so basically when Putin first invaded Ukraine back in 2014, there were efforts to bring the parties to the table, both Ukraine, Russia, as well as our European allies and the United States. Now, Putin has tried over the course of the last several years to say, oh, you don't need to negotiate with me, you need to negotiate with these puppet separatist leaders in Luhansk and Donetsk, which was a cause of great frustration in Ukraine. So Russia had largely stepped out of that Minsk process. Europeans, the Americans, and the Ukrainians were trying to get them back to the table, but clearly Putin is done with that, and he's just taking control of these breakaway provinces.
And Brett, there has been talk now and reporting to suggest that Russia will send peacekeepers into these now independent regions of Luhansk and Donetsk. But now there seems to be some equivocating on the part of the Biden administration about the response and what invasion means. Does invasion mean Russian troops now into Luhansk and Donetsk, pre-2014 or post-2014 Ukrainian borders? What do you make of that?
Well, first, I want to try and banish the term peacekeeping to have anything to do with what Russian troops are about to endeavor upon in Ukraine. This is land that was seized from Ukraine. Sending foreign forces there is an occupation. It is an invasion. This has nothing to do with keeping peace. It has everything to do with keeping that land for Russia. So I think we have to be clear and very careful also in using this, because as it gets repeated, all of a sudden it does conjure up the notion of the blue helmets from the United Nations. But let's be clear, in the rules of diplomacy, one country cannot just claim that sending its troops to another country makes them into peacekeepers. We've done away with that concept long ago, but clearly Vladimir Putin's trying to get away with it again. When it comes to the Biden administration's response, yes, what we have seen in the last couple hours is insufficient. We have got to take further steps, and I would argue robust steps, and rapidly take them in order to try and send a clear message to Putin that we will act strongly, that this is unacceptable, because as we've seen before, this wait and see, let's watch, and maybe he won't go quite as far. I mean, his speech today was pretty darn clear. He has the intention of marching forward unless and until the United States, our NATO allies, resolutely and robustly come out and say, that's enough, Vladimir, he's going to proceed.
Brett, there is reporting to also suggest more sanctions will be coming tomorrow. Let's talk about the sanctions that were imposed today. I want to just put up for our viewers a tweet the president's account put up saying and posting a photo, I have signed an executive order to deny Russia the chance to profit from its blatant violations of international law. We are continuing to closely consult with allies and partners, including Ukraine, on next steps. In about 40 minutes, there will be a UN Security Council emergency meeting. But back to these sanctions, I want to read in part from the statement. This executive order will prohibit new investment, trade, and financing by U.S. persons to, from, or in the so-called DNR and LNR regions of Ukraine. Brett, that is a very minimal move today. How many American entities were doing, financing business in the eastern part of Ukraine? It seems that it was, I don't want to say trivial, but this should be a little more heavy-handed going forward. Do you agree?
Well, and because we knew this was coming, so there should not be this lag in figuring out how we're going to respond. As you said, no, you don't have American companies breaking down the doors, as it were, to try and set up new companies, new franchises in Luhansk and Donetsk. So this is going to have little to no effect, a practical effect on Russia's calculation. And I would emphasize again that we have already seen 7 years of pretty strong economic sanctions. We are going to have to try something else, because just doing more of the same is not going to change Putin's calculation. And he sent that message pretty clearly this afternoon that he didn't see what we had done as and threatened to do as a significant enough deterrent to deviate from his current course.
And Brett, there was also discussion in that meeting with Putin and his, high-ranking Russian officials that they are prepared, at least in their view, to weather any types of sanctions package like they have done for the last 7 years. And so as a deterrent, that might not seem to be working at this point anymore. Is SWIFT still on the table? I believe I've been hearing from European allies throughout the day that they would consider that. Would we consider that here at home?
Well, look, the SWIFT issue, I think, is a delicate one, because if we go down that path, then all of a sudden we undermine confidence in that system. And so we've got to be careful on how and when we do it. Russia will have already prepared alternatives for how they are going to manage their financial exchanges, their currency exchanges through other means. They're pretty expert at this now. So, look, if North Korea can figure out how to avoid pretty robust international sanctions, I think Russia has managed to put in place a plan, a workaround for this situation. So again, we've got to look at other tools, other pressure points that we can apply to Putin. And I think a lot of it comes back to his domestic issues and how do we ensure that Russians both understand what he's doing abroad as well as what he's not doing at home. And that, I believe, will have a lot more effect on the Kremlin's calculus than adding just one more layer of economic sanctions.
Brett, you're a former diplomat. I have never seen such diplomacy happening back and forth at such rapid speed than I have over the last 48, 72 hours. It seems like President Biden is on the phone with Zelensky, with Macron, with Scholz, multiple times a day. That's an agile posture, thankfully, but is it working out?
I think, unfortunately, it may be too little, too late.
Okay.
We have seen certainly this shuttle diplomacy of both Vice President Harris as well as Tony Blinken going to Munich. Blinken was due to go back later this week to Europe to meet with Foreign Minister Lavrov. However, we needed to see this much earlier because clearly, as the White House itself has been indicating, Putin has already made up his mind, and he has, determined that what the Americans and our NATO allies have put on the table simply is not enough to dissuade him from this course. So we are going to have to look at some other options, and I think diplomacy still is a viable option. We're just going to have to do it differently. We're going to have to look at how we get creative here, and I think it's one of the challenges with some of my former colleagues who I worked with in the Obama administration who are now staffing the president's national security team is they're stuck in some of that past mindset, and we have got to look very squarely, very clearly at where we are in this moment and find out how we very rapidly are going to change these course of events, because if Putin proceeds, it will be very destabilizing, not only for Ukraine and Eastern Europe, but internationally.
Yeah, of course. And Brett, we have a live look out of Kiev right now. It's about 3:30 in the morning. And of course, we're awaiting that UN Security Council emergency meeting. Last question for you, Brett. Is the post-World War II, post-Soviet collapse, rules-based order on its last leg? I don't want to say dead, but is it hurting tonight?
Oh, absolutely. We are in a very dangerous point for the international system as we have known it for the better part of the last 75 years. So what Putin did tonight, let there be no mistake, was to put a ICBM missile right through that structure. We are going to have to do some quick and constructive work to try and repair that damage and to stabilize the international system. And let's also just bring it home for a second and say this is likely to be very costly for Americans on some of those, pocketbook issues, whether it's on gas, whether it's on food, and obviously insecurity in general is just going to drive up the price of goods and services. So this really is going to hit home very quickly.
All right, Brett Bruen, we always appreciate your time. I know it's quite dire at this hour, but thanks for guiding us through it.